Good morning, everybody. Or I guess good night for those of you going to bed. Today was a little bit different because it was a news day. Powell was speaking, right? And when Powell speaks, usually we want to stay away, right? Especially if you're trading a funded account, if you're trading FTMO or anything like that, you really don't want to be trading during news, just because there's a little bit more manipulation in the market than normal. I was trading a little bit before pre-news, right? Like I caught EU shorts right around this area here, and as soon as this candle dropped in, swept liquidity, I started getting out of my position because it was just a little bit before Powell was speaking. Could I have entered EU longs? I'm sure that there was a way on the 1 minute. Yeah, there is, and I'll explain that entry in a little bit. I didn't get into it. Again, I'm not going to be trading during news most of the time, especially for any of my funded accounts, right? And it looks like we're about to sweep this injection in this high and perhaps take a little retracement. Anyways, let's kind of explain what was going on here, what happened. So from a 4-hour perspective here, we've seen in the past, right, that we already took a stop hunt of what was a liquidity injection over here, right? We originally swept an injection right around this point here. And this was all internal liquidity to the external, right, injection. All right, so this pushed in selling momentum, right? It wasn't until we swept, I'll go into a lower time frame here, previous day lows, right? We swept this whole day right here, that majorly induced price, right? So since we induced previous day lows, we then switched this selling momentum to buying momentum. So we knew to look for buys this intraday, right? How did we know not to look for sells even though we swept liquidity here? This was the external liquidity. This was the internal liquidity. How do I know that? Because previous day highs are up here. Now we are starting to sweep that external liquidity. Remember, external liquidity is what's going to give us the direction of the market. I'm going to go over gold here in a little bit because I spotted buys. I didn't get into them again because of news, but I spotted them as they were happening and sent them into the VIP group. Anyways, so I was catching shorts here before the news, right over here. Why? Because we did have this short-term sweep, right? Like we swept 15-minute liquidity, right? So it'll be mediumly induced. And because of the daily cycle, right, we have the buildup, we swept the highs, right? I figured New York was going to continue a bit, right? Why? Because we haven't even swept the lows of Asia yet, and price needed to come sweep 15-minute liquidity in order to catalyze, right, a long move for the news, right? We knew this was valid because of what? This over here, right? Our external liquidity telling us we are still going long. So you're probably like, Ben, why didn't you get into this? Well, I could have, I really wanted to, and if you were to get into it, right, to be on the 1 minute, I think I've only showed my one-on-ones this so far, but go ahead and turn on the liquidity indicator that I gave you, right? Whenever we have a sweep of liquidity that's run by an imbalance, right, and then recovered by an imbalance, this is already your first sign, right? Your first sign is we've run the inducement with a huge imbalance, right? Whenever a ton of supply is coming in, that's a liquidity raid, right? So we're raiding these lows right here, right? This inducement. How do we know to get in? As soon as this purple imbalance shoots up, what we're waiting for is simply just a sweep of that first candle, right? Let's see if I can get my entry out. All right. We'd enter a little bit around there, stops below the imbalance, right? And that would be our position on the 1 minute. Where's our target? Well, obviously we know to go for the external liquidity, right? So I'd be aiming somewhere relatively around there. First target, obviously, to be safe would be here. That's our first structure point. We actually could have gotten into some re-entries, right? Once this confirmed, I was no longer trading. I was busy, talking to students, helping them out with graphs and questions that they had. But here's how you could have grabbed the reentries around this area here. So we had structure, right, moving to the downside, as we can see, right? All of this right here is not just trend line liquidity, but inducement for selling, right? So we knew all this had to get taken out eventually. What else do we understand? That all of these are minor inducements, right? Because they're all internal of the internal liquidity, right? So we have external liquidity, and then we have the liquidity inside of the liquidity that clicks. Here I'll show you what I mean. Right, of course, we broke through this. We never came back for reentries to where this POI here, which is where I really wanted my original buys in the 10-minute. However, price came, swept these highs, right? This candle right here was the first touch of these highs, right? This candle right here was the breaker. However, obviously there was no entry. So we waited again for the sweep of this candle, right? This black candle, which created the new highs, right? And or structural phase 2. What was the breaker of this candle here, right? Well, this candle right here, I'll make this a little bit more clear. This candle right here was the first touch. This candle was the breaker, right? So this would have been your re-entry candle. And you actually could have gotten into more buys somewhere around here. Right, so you could have gotten into buys that way on the 10-minute, and on the 1-minute, like so. You also could have gotten into buys like this. For anyone who's in my one-on-ones, y'all should be pretty familiar with these entries. If you're new, you know, through constant breakdowns, you'll probably understand this in the future. Yeah, but these were the main buys that I could pretty much see within EU today. How did I grab these sells? Well, like before, short term, I saw sells because of the sweep over here, right? Daily cycle ran the highs. And then what caused me to start selling? Well, we ran these lows right here, ran the Asian lows, right? This candle was the first candle to break the inducement, right? This candle was the breaker. So I started entering shorts, right? All around this here, right? Started entering more shorts around here. And then as price spiked through this inducement, I started taking profit and going break even here. Even one of my trading buddies told me to get out of price here because he noticed that this was a news manipulation candle, pre-news manipulation candle, and that actually caused me to get out of some of my position. But just to show you, you could have still ping-pong price today. You could have hopped into sells, right, into buys here within the New York session. In terms of London, the only move I saw was, of course, the sweep of all this liquidity here. Again, you could have used a similar method on the 1-minute to grab those type of entries, right? Or be patient on the 10-minute, but it doesn't look like the 10-minute produced. Here's one thing I want to say about the 1-minute for anyone that's new. The 1-minute, using these type of entries after sweeping liquidity, you know, it is probable and it does work. The win rate on it is not very high. You know, I'd recommend being patient, wait for these 10-minute OBs to rise, right? Following the guidelines and rules that I use. I really wouldn't try getting in on these 1-minute candles. But as you can see, it does work. Like it even worked here, right? Like what happened? We broke this with what huge purple imbalance. Where was first signs of yellow coming in was right here, right? Showing me that sellers were entering the market. Here's the sweep of the first candle, right? So those are our entries. And in London, we could have gotten these shorts here with the 1.1 SL. And our first target probably would have been Asian lows and or this inducement area right here. If we were patient. If we were patient, we could have gotten our sells all the way to this inducement here. All right, so you can clearly see we had plenty of opportunity to trade EU, and it looks like we're even getting another opportunity up here to possibly short. There is a weekly POI, right, that we could come up and run, right? And it looks like we're having plenty of rejection. It's really hard to see because I got a lot of markings in here, but there is a lot of rejection on the weekly candles right? Telling me that price might actually continue to push up. Let's move into gold here, because gold was absolutely gorgeous today. And man, I'm upset I didn't grab this, but I was showing everybody gold around this area here. Right when it touched, I was like, hey, this actually might start running up. But basically all I saw from a while ago, I was talking about these inducement lows for a long time. Here, let me go over this. All right, so yeah, I was talking about these inducement lows for a very long time. Why? Because we had our external lows here, made higher highs to more external liquidity here, right, on the 4 hour, right? So I kind of want to see a run of these highs, or these highs eventually given structure and liquidity, right? What happened, these lows induced and swept all of this, right? And now the same thing is basically what happening here again, right? Gold is fairly easy to read. You know, if you like volatile pairs, gold's a lot of fun to trade. I'd say a little bit more fun than EU, but you're not going to be grabbing the same algo ping pong trades on EU as you are gold. Gold, you're mainly going to find a lot of trend trading, right? If you trade against the trend with gold, you are going to get burned. You know, EU, you know, there's a lot of scenarios in which you can trade against the trend, but if you try doing that with gold, you will get burned. So that's why it's very important to pay attention to this high time frame inducements, especially for gold. As we can see, right, here was our last major inducement. Because this was our last major inducement, right? We knew that our high time frame bias was to remain long until what area? This area here. This is the only other area we're looking for us to remain a long-term sell bias. As of right now, we need to maintain a long-term buy bias. Once we move in, understanding that we swept this 4 hour inducement, once we move into the 15-minute, right, we can see we had all these structure points around. Yesterday, what happened? We swept Asian lows, swept all these structure points, right, these inducements. And what happened? Here was the sweep, OB4, and price came in. I had a refinement right here and got in some buys, right? We could have gotten some buys, you know, around these areas too. After we swept this inducement, we're going to get into buys here, and now we're getting into buys here. This is how you trade with the trend, right? So what happened with gold for the most part was we had, and I like to use the 10-minute, right, a huge run of these lows that ran directly into these lows. Then what happened was we created our OB. We had a morning star, right, candlestick pattern right here, right? This candle completely engulfed this candle, which allowed me to make this OB. Our first entry theoretically could have been right here. All right, now you could have grabbed re-entries on the way. I'm not going to go over them. I kind of want you guys to focus on the main move, where that main move is occurring, instead of grabbing re-entries, because re-entries, you're already increasing your margin for error as you try and re-enter more times further up into the trend. You know, it's always better to just be patient and wait for those first couple trades that happen at the bottom. You know, you're going to have a tighter SL, right, and less of a chance of breaking even. But yeah, these were our buys here, and it was because of these inducements that were placed, right? And I think, like I said before, we have a little while for gold to run, so gold might be running for quite a long time now. GU is just ugly. It just, you know, GU respects SMC a little bit more as of right now, because as we can see here, external liquidity, we had a sweep up here, which actually caused my bias to remain short pretty much throughout the entire day. But again, because of Powell, right, that's what kind of switched this up. Like, we swept these lows here, and now we're making our way higher. There is a chance at this point here that we could be seeing a reversal and or just a retracement, right? Retracement for price to go higher, or a reversal. It's one or the other here, but price will have a reaction from sweeping these highs. Structural phase 1, structural phase 2, structural phase 3. I apologize for my dog barking, but hopefully this breakdown Maybe you learned a new entry method today, learned something new, I hope, right? But yeah, that's pretty much it for this breakdown.